Increasingly, we're seeing more and more users looking to automate their day-to-day job. And what's better than using Power Automate, a tool available within the environment within Microsoft 365 and makes use of Power Platform components to achieve that very goal. In today's session, I'll walk you through Copilot with Power Automate using a basic statement and walking through the key steps around how you get started and also how you can refine your flow later on. To access Copilot with Power Automate, if you go to make.powerautomate.com, this will load up the main studio where you can go through and start building flows. The box here allows you to put in a phrase. So in my instance, I'm going to use download and attachments automatically from a shared mailbox. Once I click generate, that will go away and start looking at options to enable me to build that flow. And here you can see a number of options I've displayed. With more advanced statements, you'll have 1 to 3 options which will display, which allow you to choose between whatever's most relevant to the situation that you're handling. When we click next, it will go through and review that the connections are in place to enable the creation of the flow. So in this case, we're using Office 365 Outlook and OneDrive for Business. If I create the flow, this will allow me to jump into the main studio and enable me to further refine the different actions which are present. Here you can see we have a number of invalid parameters. Don't be scared, click onto the box and this will allow you to go through and define key values. So in this instance we have a shared mailbox, so I can come into here and put in demo box at hubcortex.com. That is my shared mailbox, and I'm going to enable that only emails with attachments will be processed, and I also want to include the attachment because we want to move that to another location later on. In terms of my file, I can choose the location of this, which in my instance will just be the root, and with the file name and using dynamic content, I can look at what's in my email. Here you can see a number of details, a number of attributes, and if I click to see more, I can scroll down and view the attachment name. Once I click add, that'll add it into the file name, and for file content we do exactly the same steps, however this time we're choosing the attachment content. Once those attributes or parameters are in place, if you click save in the top right, that will allow you to go and test the flow. So here if I go to test, manually test it and select test, what I can do next is send an email through to the shared mailbox, and what my flow will do is pick up that incoming email, which we should see drop in very shortly. Here we can see that the email has come through. We have a file attached, which is our contacts, and if I go back into my flow, I can see the status of what's been running. If I select onto the boxes, I can see additional information, so I can see my inputs, the mailbox it's gone to, and any additional information. Here we can see that's successfully gone through. If I go to my create file, it's taken key attributes and gone away and actually created that file. Going into OneDrive, we can see that the contacts upload file has also been added. So by selecting that file, I can then see the information populated within it. What I'll be doing next is how we can build on this further and enable further system integration. With further integration, what we can look to do is start integrating it with our other line of business applications. So once that file comes through, we need to look at how we can use Copilot to enable Power Automate to then take that uploaded content and load it into our system. In this instance, we're going to be creating contacts. So the file that's been uploaded, as you can see here, has information such as first name, last name, and email. We can also evaluate this further by looking at things like table design to look at there's a contacts table and also take note of the sheet. With this information, we can go back into our flow and start looking at how we can build on top of the capabilities we already have in place. What I've also done to facilitate this functionality is updated the folder path. This way, any files which are submitted into the system will be in a single location. If you wanted, you could build on top of this further and use things like SharePoint, or potentially even making use of storage accounts to achieve similar functionality. In my instance, what I'm going to look at doing is saying, right, I want to go away and add an additional action following my create file. Now, traditionally, you'd go through, click the add action button, and try and find what you're after. And in this instance, we'd be looking at extracting rows of data from an uploaded Excel. Instead, what we can use is Copilot. So here I can ask a question. So I will ask extract rows from the Excel file once it's been created in OneDrive. And with that statement, it will go away and evaluate a number of actions. So here we can see that it's gone away and removed some actions and added some additional bits. In this instance, we can see that that's not what we want. So we can undo those changes, revert back to normal, which allows us to undo that change. If we go back to our question, we can paste that back in and refine our statement. So if we change this to after the file has been created, extract rows from the Excel file and load into Dataverse. And by passing that through, we can see that it's pulled through the email still. It's understood that we need to create a file. It's understood that we need to process the file. And then ultimately, it's looking at how we can add rows into Dataverse. Now let's go and check some of these aspects. So if I jump into my list rows, we can see here that we've got the location. We've got the document library. Now this is stated document library, whereas we may want to change that slightly. And we also have a file path. So here we've got the path that comes through, and we've also got a table. Now here, if we quickly go into there, our document library is going to be OneDrive. Our file path is correct. That's from the file that we've created. And our table in this instance, we know that it's going to be contacts. And we can double check that by going into our Excel and see that. There we go, we've got contact. Looking at the new rows here, we can see it's going to evaluate each item within that Excel workbook. And we can look at creating new rows into a table. So the table we want to enter data into is our contact table. So what we can do, we can either search down for that table, or if we start typing, we can find contacts. What that will then do is show up information that we need to enter, last name being one of them. And if we go into dynamic content, we can add in additional information. Now, in this instance, because we haven't got the file uploaded already, when we do go to dynamic content, we won't see things like first name and last name. The reason we can see those now is I've gone away and added in the file and manually uploaded it to OneDrive. However, what that allows us to do is go into our Dataverse function where we have last name. We can go through use dynamic content to select last name and add that in. Where we have email, we can come through add dynamic content and bring in the email. And where we have first name, we can use that to add dynamic content and add in first name. Now I can go back to my table here, change this out and use dynamic content to pass through the path. And load that in. So now when we test, we should see that the file comes through and it's processed, loading data into the Dataverse table. Here you can see we have a minor error. So what we can do is find out where the error sits, so we can see this within the create file and quickly go through and change this out. So we can select attachment name, bring that back in, and attach our file content. So now when we save, that'll go through validation and we'll save that flow for us, enabling us to finally test. So going back to our mailbox, we can see that the file has come in, named Dataverse Upload. If we go into our file upload folder, we can see this now come through. If we look at our Power Automate, we can see that the flow has been executed. And if we jump into this, we can see additional information around each stage and ultimately how the record has been created. And if we quickly look through here, we're looking for the email address job.blogs@hubcortex.com. So if I go now into Dataverse and look at my app, I can see that the contact has been created. And by selecting that, we can see the first name, last name, and email. So in summary, looking at Power Automate and using Copilot is a brilliant tool that's going to enable you to quickly create flows if you've got limited knowledge and understanding of how the underlying components come together. You can see that there are sometimes some bugs that show up, and having to go through and reuse Copilot to refactor your flow works in a good number of cases, but you do need to do a bit of due diligence to look over the previous aspects to ensure it's still working as expected. Taking this to a real world scenario, you could potentially use this to manage contacts coming through, potentially from third-party systems. And again, although we've looked at bringing through contacts via an email and an attachment, that's actually quite a common use case we see in a number of different organizations. So again, you can expand on this further. You can make use of Copilot to automate your processes and ultimately connect multiple systems together without needing to have that level of manual human interaction.